Attacks are rapidly ramping up across the Middle East in a major expansion of the Iran war. This includes highly coordinated strikes explicitly targeting United States troops stationed inside Saudi Arabia. The escalating violence was detailed in a breaking dispatch published today by Politico. This development marks a fundamental and dangerous expansion of the operational theater in the Persian Gulf. The message delivered from Tehran is that no American military installation in the region is off-limits. According to Politico, the attacks involved a complex combination of drones and precision-guided munitions. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is reportedly claiming full operational responsibility for this new wave of attacks. United States officials suggest that the strikes were designed to overwhelm sophisticated regional air defense systems. The targeting of Saudi territory represents a profound escalation in the geopolitical geometry of this conflict. Tehran claims its forces are legitimately responding to ongoing American military aggression across the region. However, military assessments suggest the Iranian strategy is focused on fracturing the United States alliance network. Global financial markets are reacting with extreme volatility as the prospect of a wider war materializes today. The attacks on bases in Saudi Arabia have not yet been independently verified to have caused mass casualties, but the promise of further strikes reveals the underlying vulnerability of the United States security apparatus. Decisive American military action in recent weeks has clearly not deterred the Iranian regional command structure. Therefore, the logic of the conflict dictates that the violence will inevitably spill across sovereign borders. A report from Politico indicates that the administration views this geographic expansion with extreme alarm. The situation has reached a critical threshold where the concept of a contained war is officially dead. If Tehran continues to strike the Arabian Peninsula, the United States faces an impossible strategic dilemma. For deeper insight into this rapidly evolving situation, follow our ongoing analysis. Subscribe and enable notifications to stay ahead of every major development. To understand the gravity of these specific strikes, we must analyze the changing map of the battlefield. For weeks, the conflict was largely concentrated in the skies over Iran, Iraq, and the Levant. Saudi Arabia had reportedly maintained a delicate and calculated neutrality during the initial phases of the war. The kingdom is believed to have denied the United States permission to launch offensive strikes from its territory. Riyadh's primary strategic objective was to avoid becoming a direct target for Iranian retaliatory munitions. The attacks reported by Politico demonstrate that this strategy of operational insulation has completely failed. Iran is demonstrating that hosting United States military personnel makes any nation a legitimate combat zone. What does striking Saudi Arabia actually mean in the context of the broader Middle Eastern war? The United States has relied on the Arabian Peninsula as a secure logistical sanctuary for decades. It is the foundational staging ground for American power projection throughout the entire Central Command theater. To hit bases inside the kingdom requires penetrating the most heavily defended airspace on the planet. Defense analysts believe this involves systematically mapping and exploiting the radar blind spots of allied networks. It means neutralizing the psychological sanctuary that American troops believed they possessed in the Southern Gulf. The concept of a localized conflict has been entirely erased by the trajectory of these new munitions. This approach transforms a localized kinetic engagement into a borderless war of regional exhaustion. The Iranian leadership views the expansion of the target matrix as a core component of their doctrine. They calculate that the United States cannot simultaneously defend every node of its massive regional footprint. Washington must now recalculate the logistical viability of supplying thousands of troops in an active free-fire zone. The White House is essentially discovering the severe limitations of a dispersed, static military presence. The central strategic logic of these strikes lies in the political relationship between Washington and Riyadh. If the United States military attracts Iranian fire, the host nation inevitably absorbs the collateral damage. Tehran has consistently signaled that it will punish any government that facilitates American military hegemony. Strategic analysts suggest that the attacks are a calculated wedge driven directly into the United States-Saudi alliance. Hitting American bases forces the Saudi royal court into a highly uncomfortable and public political corner. The kingdom must now weigh the defensive benefits of the United States' presence against active kinetic risks. The Saudi royal court has spent billions cultivating a global image of supreme domestic security and stability. A single Iranian drone penetrating that airspace inflicts incalculable reputational and financial damage to that exact image. This is the exact nightmare scenario that regional diplomats have reportedly been warning the administration about. If the United States military cannot protect its own bases, its value as a regional guarantor collapses. The calculus inside the Pentagon reportedly assumes that Saudi Arabia will remain a steadfast and compliant partner. However, macroeconomic models and domestic political pressures in Riyadh indicate a much more fragile reality. The administration must now prove that its defensive umbrella is not a geopolitical illusion constructed on outdated assumptions. The threat of Iranian strikes on Saudi soil threatens the entire economic diversification plan of the kingdom. The attacks are simultaneously a direct threat to the stability of the global energy investment climate. This structural vulnerability is the precise leverage that Tehran relies upon to isolate the United States. The Iranian strategy does not require defeating the United States Army in a massive ground battle. It only requires making the cost of hosting American soldiers politically and economically unbearable for Arab leaders. By targeting these specific installations, Iran has inadvertently highlighted the extreme isolation of United States forces. The operational reality of these attacks exposes a profound mathematical crisis in modern military defensive theory. United States bases in Saudi Arabia are protected by layered Patriot and THAAD missile defense batteries. These systems represent the absolute pinnacle of American aerospace engineering and kinetic interception technology. However, a report from Politico suggests that these defenses are being deliberately saturated and exhausted. The economics of this specific tactical engagement heavily favor the Iranian offensive architecture and strategy. An American interceptor missile reportedly costs several $1 million to manufacture and deploy to the theater. The Iranian suicide drones and localized cruise missiles cost a microscopic fraction of that financial amount. When Tehran launches a saturated swarm, the United States is forced into an unsustainable financial exchange. This creates an asymmetric war of attrition that heavily penalizes the technologically superior but economically constrained defender. Every successful interception is a tactical victory, but a profound strategic and economic defeat for Washington. Furthermore, the physical inventory of American interceptor missiles in the region is finite and rapidly depleting. The logistics chain required to resupply these specialized munitions from the United States takes significant time. The Pentagon is reportedly scrambling to deploy additional air defense assets, pulling them from other critical global theaters. This reallocation leaves American interests in the Indo-Pacific and Eastern Europe temporarily vulnerable to opportunistic adversarial maneuvers. Iran is reportedly operating on the assumption that they can simply outproduce the American defensive shield. This leaves the United States facing a scenario where its bases become structurally indefensible over time. The result would force Washington to either evacuate the facilities or accept significant American casualties. The administration's public posture is a promise that force protection remains the absolute highest priority. But the exit strategy from this interception trap requires a technological solution that does not currently exist. The war that was supposed to showcase American defensive supremacy is instead highlighting its mathematical limits. The global energy system's structural vulnerability is deeply intertwined with these strikes on the Arabian Peninsula. It is a severe problem for every economy on Earth that relies on the stability of Saudi crude. The political narrative of contained military strikes is consistently shattered by the geography of the oil market. United States military bases in Saudi Arabia are located in hazardous proximity to critical energy infrastructure. This is because the historical security pact was specifically designed to protect the kingdom's oil-producing regions. Therefore, the consequences of Iranian munitions landing in Saudi Arabia will not be confined to military targets. Price disruptions generated by the fear of collateral damage will arrive directly in global commodity markets. Consumers in Europe, Asia, and the Americas will absorb the cost of this regional instability immediately. When shrapnel falls near the processing facilities of Dhahran, the global insurance risk premium skyrockets permanently. Insurance underwriters in London are already signaling that coverage for Saudi infrastructure may require unprecedented premium hikes. A localized conflict has effectively morphed into a direct assault on the central bank of global crude. The geopolitical leverage that oil provides is being wielded by Tehran with terrifying and calculated precision today. The operational reality of how the United States responds to these attacks is highly problematic. If the United States launches retaliatory bombers from Saudi airspace, Iran will declare Saudi Arabia a co-belligerent. Tehran has warned that any nation allowing its airspace to be used for offensive strikes becomes a target. This would immediately transition the kingdom from an unwilling host into an active participant in a regional war. Saudi leadership is reportedly terrified of this exact scenario and is demanding American operational restraint. The United States is trapped between the requirement to retaliate and the absolute necessity of Allied survival. This leaves the United States military effectively paralyzed, possessing massive firepower but lacking political permission to use it. The force commitment escalates defensively. The exit strategy vanishes, and the original deterrence objective becomes completely obscured. This is the precise pattern that the United States is demonstrating as attacks ramp up globally today. The situation currently unfolding represents a dangerous and fundamental paradox at the heart of American military strategy. The United States possesses the absolute kinetic capability to obliterate Iranian launch sites across the Persian Gulf. However, it completely lacks the geopolitical freedom to do so without sacrificing the security of host nations. The mathematical certainty of air defense exhaustion guarantees that some munitions will eventually penetrate the protective shield. The strikes on Saudi Arabia are a stark, unavoidable admission of the foundational vulnerability of forward deployment. Hosting a foreign military strategically located near the world's most critical energy infrastructure guarantees systemic collateral risk. Iran's strategy of striking American bases while holding allied economies hostage exploits this exact American vulnerability perfectly. Every subsequent strike erodes the foundational myth of American military invincibility in the eyes of regional partners. The transition from a contained conflict to a borderless regional war marks a terrifying new geopolitical chapter. The strategic landscape in the Middle East is currently balanced on the absolute edge of a historic rupture. The White House faces a rapidly expanding threat matrix, and whether deterrence can be restored remains entirely unknown. The effectiveness of the American defensive architecture has yet to be proven against a fully unconstrained adversary. The White House must now navigate an escalating crisis where traditional military responses only accelerate the strategic damage. For now, the situation remains highly fluid, and the potential for a sudden, catastrophic regional escalation is imminent. Uncertainties remain regarding the true breaking point of both the United States alliance network and Iranian operational capability. To truly understand the cascading consequences of these strategic failures, ensure you remain engaged with our network. We analyze the critical intersection of military force and global geopolitics to bring you the unvarnished reality. Thank you for your time and for seeking a deeper, more analytical perspective on today's defining international crisis.